Okay, I'd like to ask the following people to come up and join me here at this head table. We've got Edward Erfurt, who is the coordinator for Strong Towns. He's with us. We have Mr. Seth Harry, professional planner and architect. We have Deborah Carpenter, who's the new Frederick City Planning Director. And we have Tay Harris, Calvert County Long Range Planner. Come up and join me if you will. How many of you are community planners? Let me see a show of hands if you would. Okay, I would say the majority of the folks here today. Well, good. All right, we'll start with Edward.
Hi, thank you for inviting us here today. I'm Edward Erfurt. I'm the Director of Community Actions at Strong Towns. It's a not-for-profit advocacy organization. We're doing work around the country. My background itself, I am an architect. I became an urban designer. I've worked in municipal government for over 15 years, working with redevelopment agencies, and then coming to a small community in eastern West Virginia, working there as the Director of Community Development, working with community planners. I had a planning commission, a board of zoning adjustment, kind of looking towards the north of us, of what you all were doing in Maryland, and trying to bring some of those ideas down into West Virginia, where planning is not top priority. In the last year, I've joined Strong Towns, and I'm working now across the country through our community action labs. I'm working with communities like yourselves that are struggling to shift the conversation, to look at things differently in the way understanding the built development pattern of the past has not been as productive or as successful as we had been promised. And how do we deal with that? And how do we deal with the public? How do we work with staff? In most of your municipalities, you probably have brilliant staff that are being asked to do onerous acts, that are dealing with public that is confused and not open to change. So working across the country through Strong Towns with our organization, we're trying to share those ideas, not to tell people what to do, but to share ideas of success stories from around the country of tackling those issues and advancing those in people's own communities.
All right, thanks, Edward. Debbie?
All right, my name is Deborah Carpenter. You may call me Debbie because we're all friends here now, right? So we'll do that. My title is Director of Planning and Permitting. I'm very happy that's rolling off my tongue a little easier now. I've been in that role for a little over 2 months, so it is fresh. Prior to that, I was the Director of Planning Growth Management in Charles County. I was there for a little over 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was the Planning Director for Garrett County. So big, broad diversity here in the jurisdictions I've worked in. I worked in Garrett County for 24 years. So all told, I've been in planning for 28 years. My education is I hold a master's degree in geography with concentration in geographic information systems. I have a bachelor's in environmental analysis and planning. I, of course, hold my AICP. And I am a member of APA, both national and Maryland, work with the Mako Planners affiliate, and so I know the members of NDP very well. And I was privileged to serve on the Sustainable Growth Commission under 2 governors, both O'Malley and Hogan. I also love to mention that I had the unique opportunity of being intimately involved with the formation of the first resilience authority in the state of Maryland, and that's in Charles County. And I also served as their chair for about 1.5 years. And that's it.
Thanks, Debbie. Seth?
Good morning. My name is Seth Harry. I'm a licensed architect and planner. Been a member of the APA since the late 1980s. And for the last 31 years, I've been president and founder of Seth Harry & Associates, Incorporated Architects and Planners. During that period of time, the firm has worked for both private and public sector clients, including developers, small to medium-sized municipalities, and county and regional planning authorities, both domestically and abroad, including here in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic region on projects ranging from small infill mixed-use projects to new communities, urban redevelopment revitalization projects, TOD and transit corridor planning and design, as well as regulatory tools, including design guidelines and form-based codes. The vast majority of these projects were undertaken through meaningful and robust community outreach and engagement processes, which has pretty much been a hallmark of our practice all along. Prior to that, I was a project design director for the enterprise development company, Columbia-based enterprise development company, working on many of the company's most successful retail and mixed-use projects, again, both domestically and abroad, and have subsequently used that experience to inform our work with many smaller Main Street communities to optimize their retail market positions in their regional context. So we've worked with a lot of small communities, helping to improve the performance of their commercial properties. And to provide effective economic development and revitalization strategies for both local business retention and new business recruitment for the purpose of strengthening their downtown performance and resiliency.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Seth. Okay, Tay, your chance.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tay Harris, and I started my career in community planning, getting a master's in community planning with an undergraduate degree in English. I started at the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust, putting together affordable housing packages for the city of Boston and Philadelphia. And then I moved on to the Charles County Economic Development Commission, which was restarted at the time I started working for the EDC, and I did marketing and business attraction. And then after that, I went to Hudson County and ran a CDBG program, the service projects, and the home ESG projects. And then I meandered back to Maryland and worked for the state of Maryland for MDP, and I did Chesapeake Bay agreement work and served as staff to the Bay Cabinet. And then I had children and started a sole proprietorship with Linda Eisenberg, who's sitting in the room right now. She is currently the Director of Planning for Howard County, and I did that for several years, and that's when I got into comprehensive planning. I did comprehensive small area plans for Allegheny County, and then I also did small area plan for Carroll County, and I did some work for Indian Head, doing an analysis for Enterprise Zone. And since then, I worked for Calvert County, and I did flood mitigation planning for the most flood-prone communities in the county, as well as the sea level rise analysis and an analysis for stormwater infrastructure to try to address some of the flooding issues that are occurring in those communities. Then I moved on to the Critical Area Commission. I worked for the state, did that for 6 years, and now I'm back at Calvert County. And I'm proud to say that I took over long-range planning for Jenny Plummer-Welker. And so now I sit here today, and I am engaging in updating the 7 town center master plans in the county.
All right. Excellent, excellent. Okay, and we'll, in no particular order, we'll now ask our panelists to chime in and share, particularly as regards community planning, what have been the strongest impressions and insights that you have gained as a result of the experience and the roles that you shared with us? Who would like to start in that regard?
I will.
Okay.
So over the years, I noticed for long-range planning that the nexus between consistency with the comprehensive plan and water and sewer planning, and also the staging of development and the timing of development, that nexus has been made stronger over the years to help manage growth in the designated areas through the state's growth management policies and programs and smart growth. So that's one thing I've noticed. And it's supposed to make it stronger, but I know in Calvert County, for example, we have strong planning for designated places through the town centers, and we also have PFAs. But we also struggle with commercial development along our Route 24, and also getting more residential development into, or really around our town centers, because our town centers are designated mostly for commercial development. with the approximate mile radius around the town centers targeted for residential development. With the use of TDRs, we also offer increased density, but we're struggling to realize that still after all these years.
Okay. Debbie, how about you next in terms of your perspective, your experience as community planner?
The strongest impressions that I remember, and I'll bless you with two stories from the bookends of my career. I always remember my first planning director, my first job. His name was John Nelson. He was in Garrett County for many, many years. And when I started, I was a GIS specialist. And I remember having a project where I was helping the school board with school redistricting. So all of you shiver a little bit when I say that, because that is not an easy job. But I was fresh and I was new and right out of college, and I was like, oh, this is a spatial exercise, right? I can do this. And I was very proud of myself. And I remember going to John and going, well, you know, this was easily done, right? I've got equal number of students in each district. I just had to move the lines. And he said, Debbie, every time you move a line, you affect somebody's life. And you need to remember that. And that has never left my head. So that's the first bookend. That was when I first started. Well, now I'm going to tell you a story about the Resilience Authority. So I've been able to speak at a lot of different places. And one of the best stories that I have about speaking at Resilience Authorities, I love doing it, is my pink elephant story. And you're never going to forget the pink elephant story. So I always tell people to imagine that you walk into a room, and this room is got a big elephant in it. And I'm not just talking about any big elephant. It's huge, it's pink, it's got a tutu, there's a disco ball. I mean, you cannot miss this elephant. Also in this room, though, you notice that there's people, and they're trying to live with this elephant. But there's not a whole lot of room, and you think, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I got to run in there and fix it. So you run up to the people and go, oh my gosh, you've got this huge elephant. What you need to do is to fix this elephant. And they look at you and they say, what elephant? We don't know what you're talking about. And you leave that room going, how can they not? It's so obvious. Like, how can they be that stupid, right? And you just get frustrated and you want to walk away, or you just want to beat them over the head with what you think they should do. But you've got to come at it a different way. They're not worried about the elephant. They're worried about the fact that they've got a foot of space. They're right next to somebody who doesn't believe in showers and somebody else that won't shut up, and they're worried about their space. So if you go into that room and you say, look, it seems to me like you don't have a lot of space here, and that's got to be uncomfortable for you. I think that I have a solution, and maybe if we work together, that will get you a lot farther. Now, I tell that story in the context of resilience by saying, don't go into a neighborhood and say, did you see the wildfires out west? Did you see that tsunami? Climate change is a horrible thing. You need to do. Go into that neighborhood and you say, I noticed you have flooding in your backyard. I think maybe we have a solution. So the whole biggest impression that I have about planning through the years, through the beginning to the end, is it's about the people, it's about their vision. And if you don't start with them, you will get nowhere and you won't be successful.
All right, cool. Thanks, Debbie. Edward, back in 2019, we reached out to Chuck Marone, who's credited with a good deal of starting and taking Strong Towns to the strong impression that it's made on many, many people. And it was delightful to hear from him. And since then, I think many of us have realized that there's a very strong planning voice that's available through Strong Towns. Okay, and so we're really, really glad that you're with us. What has been some of the impressions and insights that you have gained in terms of your experience with them?
Well, it took me a long time to figure this out because started in this as technical staff. I went to architecture school, I met with the planners, I was heavily influenced in the first couple weeks of architecture school with a lecture by Leon Creer and Andres Duany, and changed the way I saw what was happening around the world, and that's gosh, 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago, hearing that. And at that time, things in the built world were much different than what we look at today. What I've learned through this is that our cities are complex adaptive systems. They're so complex that as individuals, we have a really hard time in understanding these systems. And you all see that with the elephant in the room. You don't understand why maybe your neighbor doesn't see something, why we don't understand these pieces. And many staff, many technical folks and well-intentioned elected officials and appointed offices try to make order out of these complex systems. And again, well-intentioned order, but that order sets up this system that doesn't allow our cities to adapt. And I think you probably have all kind of seen this. We adopt a rule, pass a new code, approve a development, and we see a result that we don't like. And it's hard to change that because there's another rule or another vision that has been laid out, another plan on the shelf. Understanding this complex system that's out there, trying to be more nimble in how we react and what we respond to is something that took me a long time to learn. And it's difficult in the positions with communities when we have regulations and large comprehensive plans and regulatory components. But getting everybody to start thinking about these systems being so complex, it's more complex than an individual may understand or realize. And I've seen places flourish by dealing with that next smallest step of these systems. So some of the wisdom and insight that we at Strong Towns would share with folks is that these giant leaps that we know we want to try to jump to and set forward, we can't fully understand all of those consequences of those giant leaps. We might describe it as unintended consequences, but because our systems, our cities are so complex that we can't envision every aspect of it. Looking at those more nimble steps, the next smallest step is some insight that I would share with everyone here to be thinking about those struggles you're dealing with in your communities and the projects that are coming in front of your commissions and boards.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Edward. Okay, Seth, your turn. As regards community planners and community planning, and community planning in general, what have been the strongest impressions and insights that you have gained? What have you learned as a result of your perspective?
Well, I will say that just sitting here listening to my fellow panelists, I realize that I've been actually quite fortunate because I've been kind of working at this nexus almost from day one. We were doing a lot of urban infill projects at a time when people were fleeing the inner cities in droves. And we were working with very enlightened political leaders, developers. I was working for a development company at that time that were grappling with both the social and economic issues in front of them and trying to create a vision for a long-term sustainable reinvestment in their urban centers. And so a lot of the stuff that is currently being talked about now is sort of things that I was doing pretty much all along throughout my career, and it's been very gratifying to see a lot of these ideas being both recognized and embraced, not just with my fellow professionals, but within a lot of the communities that we work in. And when I started out actually working for a small architecture firm in Old Town, Alexandria, which isn't far from here, just literally down the creek, down the stream. And it was the core of King Street at the foot of the Potomac was just then trying to kind of revitalize, doing exactly the same things that we were doing on a much larger scale around the globe, but in a much more locally focused way. And then subsequently, again, kind of echoing some of the comments, this idea of dealing with complex systems and how to balance those. And particularly in my own personal interest is the interface between the regional and the local and how those things influence and impact each other, both systematically but also from an economic point of view. And these are all things that I've been thinking about pretty much since day one, because I started out really working on the development side of the equation. But over time, that focus has changed, and after I got out of the development side and entered private practice, my interest and focus was, again, primarily working with smaller municipalities that didn't have the resources that these larger cities did, and also trying to figure out how, as Edward was talking about, trying to maximize the value of the investments of those individual communities through more enlightened, more thoughtful approaches to design, and taking all of those unintended consequences of the prior sort of generation of planning models into consideration. And the other thing, big takeaway for me personally, because once I moved in that direction, almost all of the work that we were doing involved a very robust community outreach and engagement process. And I've learned through repeatedly undertaking these processes that even though it's not the easiest way to get things done, in fact, it can be incredibly challenging. We've done this in some of the most challenging political contexts you can imagine. There's a commonality, I think, in terms of how communities respond to and react to proposed changes, and having an opportunity to participate in that in a meaningful and transparent way, I think has been hugely transformational, both in terms of having an honest conversation with ourselves, essentially, but also giving people a voice in that process. And I worked with a number of colleagues that kind of pioneered this idea of a very design-driven approach where graphic representations, very precise graphic representations of what the community is asking for is part of that iterative process. And the community is able to see those changes in the plan as we proceed through that process in real time, their inputs being incorporated in that process. And then to have examples of codes that actually ensure that what they've expressed and articulated will actually be built exactly as they have expressed those. And now at 30 years on, because this was starting back again when Edward was talking about with Andres Duane and Leon Creer, both of whom I've done a lot of work with over the years, I've seen the effectiveness of that approach in terms of getting community buy-in and support. But not only that, the community, the citizens themselves have become more knowledgeable and sophisticated about their understanding of these issues and how physical planning and design can impact their lives on a daily basis. Some of the things that Bill was talking about, traffic congestion, all of these things, plus the fiscal impacts, which Smart Towns is talking about. So if I were to say one single thing, it's that, again, that robust, meaningful, and transparent community outreach and engagement process is probably one of the most key things that has facilitated and enabled everything else we're talking about this morning.
All right. Excellent. Thanks, Seth. Any other comments in terms of what we have learned as community planners from the experience that we in our communities have had over the last 10, 20 plus years? Anybody? Okay. Is there anyone out in the audience that has a different opinion or wants to contribute another aspect of what you have gained in terms of your experience and perspective as a citizen planner? Anyone? Raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you. I don't know. They're reticent this morning. Okay. All right.
Give them more caffeine.
Yes. The coffee's in the back. Yes, go ahead.
So, my name's Mitchell. I'm from the town of Centerville in Queen Anne's County. Became a planning commissioner 2.5 years ago or so. I think one of the biggest impressions for me at first was I got really bogged down in trying to understand the laws, the codes really quickly. And I got so bogged down that I stopped asking questions start with the easy questions first, and there's probably somebody else on your planning commission that's also really focused on codes, and hopefully you don't have to be everything at once.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Have a comment or a contribution? Yes, sir.
Hi,
And who are you, sir?
I'm Rodney. I'm a planning commissioner for the city of Frederick.
Excellent.
And one of the things that we've been dealing with, and it's starting to become more apparent to us that after our 2020 comprehensive plan, which I think is brilliant, when we allow ourselves in the implementation of it, we find ourselves passing the buck on certain things. NPDUs is one thing. We need moderately priced housing units in the city of Frederick, so what we do is we ask the developer to do it. But we give them an app. We say, okay, if you pay $16,500 per unit, you don't have to put up an PDUs. And what we're dealing with now is that aggregate, and the same thing is true with schools. We collect money from developers because the schools are overloaded. So we let them off the hook. So we don't seem to have a plan for what metrics to analyze how we're doing to our.
Right. Excellent, excellent. And that actually suggests a great segue in terms of the second perspective that we wanted to share the panelist opinions on and your contribution as well, and that's looking forward over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, okay, in terms of your communities and the communities that you are familiar with. How do you expect the role and the challenges that are going to be facing local planning commissions and BZAs to further evolve? Okay, we've come this distance. There's been a lot of growth and development. And now going forward, in terms of the values, the objectives, the goals that you, your communities, your planning commission has, okay, what are the challenges that you see? How will we deal with that? All right, let's start with our panelists who are in a planning commission role. How about you first, Bridget?
Yes. Looking forward, I can see things are going to get more complicated. Not that your job currently isn't complicated, but it's not going to get any easier. I feel like incorporating equity in all that you do, incorporating sustainability and resilience, just looking at affordable housing and how do you balance the need for affordable housing with controlled growth. These are complicated issues, and it requires you to be highly educated. It requires you to deal with people in your community also highly educated. It requires more of your time. And oh, by the way, it's hard to get people to serve on a planning commission. So if you're going to make it more complicated and you're going to require more time, how are you going to balance that? I see that as one of the biggest challenges going forward.
Okay. Tay, any comments?
Well, I agree. It is going to get more challenging, and I know for Calvert County, it used to, 20, 25 years ago, it was fast growing, but over the years, there's been growth management policies, programs, and regulations put in place, and Calvert County has a steady, slow growth rate now, and in our town centers, we have some infrastructure issues, water and sewer issues, and then in a few, it's adequate. So what we have to do is make sure the Planning Commission understands all the intricacies of trying to direct growth into these areas with the infrastructure challenges, but we have also, over the years, the Planning Commission composition has changed, because Calvert County was traditionally a farming community, so there was bankers and farmers on the Planning Commission, and now we have a wider variety of people with different professional backgrounds sitting on the Planning Commission, so that should help things in terms of diverse perspectives and input.
Okay. Seth, what kind of challenges and changes going forward over the next several years do you see from your perspective?
Well, I think obviously housing is a critical issue and a very contentious one to address at a practical level. I mean, I think in general, there's broad support and recognition of the need. And again, the challenge is how do you address that in a way that that also takes into consideration all of the other factors, the existing residents, communities, and so forth. And the comment regarding the city of Frederick, we actually did a analysis of the city of Frederick. That's where my office is located, city of Frederick, Maryland. We were asked to try to find a regulatory, smoking gun that was causing housing, that was limiting, I guess, the amount of new housing that was being developed within the city itself. And rather than focus on a single site, we developed sort of 5 prototypical project types that were being built in the downtown at that time. And then we actually mapped out the entire regulatory framework depending upon which one of those 5 prototypical examples you engaged with the city from a regulatory point of view. And then we did pro formas for each one. So we would do a zero existing condition analysis, and we would do one taking away our best guess at what those regulatory impediments might be, and then just literally took everything out other than health and life safety, but fees, the whole 9 yards. And we kind of had this little, sort of tachometer, red, green, and yellow, based on what we thought was an acceptable market rate return on investment for a potential builder developer. And what we quickly realized was that there was almost nothing that reduced or I should say increased the return on investment sufficiently to compete with suburban Frederick and the residential development in the county, literally just a short distance, just on the other side of the city's property lines. So it was a revelation, because nobody had actually ever looked at that challenge at that level of detail and so broadly and comprehensively. And so basically it was kind of interesting, because one of the things that it pointed out was that developing housing in the city itself was kind of a niche market, and it was one of the things that allowed smaller independent builders to compete with the larger regional and national builders out on the periphery. But we were also asked to make some recommendations in terms of how to adjust that. And a lot of that was based not on fees, but actually the impact fees, and in relation to the scale of the unit being developed, different unit types and sizes and configurations to help address that. But the bottom line was it's a tough challenge, and you really have to get into the weeds, and you have to do that kind of analysis, and you do have to use codes that help to streamline and reduce those costs wherever possible. But it's always going to be an uphill struggle, which gets back to, again, this idea of greater coordination between the local municipalities and the larger county and regional development agencies to make sure those costs and impacts are being appropriately and equitably allocated throughout the region.
How many of you in our audience in your jurisdiction have this same kind of concern going forward about the opportunity, the role of affordable housing in your planning? I see lots of hands, lots of hands. Okay, Edward, in terms of Strong Towns perspective and yours,
Yeah,
I'm sure that's one of them, but what other perspectives?
No, let me frame it, because this is a discussion that every community, if they're not having, they should be having. As citizen planners on a planning commission or a BZA, I want to kind of recognize the bridging gap that you have in your community. You have an important role, and you're stuck between 2 realms. You have policymakers, the elected officials in all of your communities that have adopted the regulations that you are governed by. They set those policies, and they're asking you as citizens to come in and help them figure it out and work through that stuff. You are the first face of these projects, right? It's the first time the public sees some of this stuff is at your commission meetings. And you get to be the ones that have to stand there and listen to your neighbors and their opinions of this. Some of these you personally may not appreciate, and you go through and you realize you're stuck with the policies that have been set. There's certain development rights there. You also are bridging between the technical staff. So all of your municipalities have the technical staff that have been trained and certified. They've gone through college, multiple degrees. The different organizations have certified to say they can do these things. And they have reviewed the applications from a technical aspect. And they're giving recommendations to you as a group to make decisions on these projects. You're in a tough spot. It's a really, really difficult position, but important in the community. You have this moral rudder of the community as a citizen and have a voice of whether or not these projects are good or bad. So that's something really important to recognize and think through this. Some of the bad news out there that we also have to recognize is that we can't afford to build anything new. We can't afford to build new roads. The developments that are coming forward in front of most of your commissions are going to make your cities poorer. We talk about this at Strong Towns in a big umbrella. We call it the growth Ponzi scheme. I doubt in your planning commissions and in the technical staff and in your ordinances that there's any fiscal analysis done on the return on investment for your developments. So if a house is built today, what are the long-term liabilities for the community? What is it going to cost for policing? What is it going to cost to maintain the road in front of it, the stormwater system, to upkeep with the Chesapeake Bay requirements? What is it going to cost to repave that road or fix the sewer line and water line 90 years when that needs to be done? We're not asking those questions. So when we see development as Seth has described, and when we talk about affordable housing, we're competing in an environment that is an unfair environment. Most of our development is subsidized. That outward expansion that we've seen time and time again are on the edge of town is highly costly, and we charge the same permit fees, we charge the same utility fees. We actually ask them to build bigger roads and bigger pipes than anywhere else in our municipalities. Well-intentioned, because we want to be sure we can accommodate that capacity, but that is at a cost. And that cost is being put back onto the communities. So one of the challenges, I think, that as being stuck between the technical staff and the policymakers is to ask those tough questions about these developments coming forward. Can your community actually afford what is coming in front of you first? When we talk about the challenges of affordable housing and stormwater and infill, the challenge that all of you are facing, and the professionals on this panel can speak to it more, is that the volume of applications coming to all of your planning commissions is growing. The demand for applications are greater. Part of that is the economy. People want to build, we're in that. But also part of that are the regulations we impose on ourselves. So if we look at your codes, I describe building plans and I describe zoning codes as Greek. It's a completely different language. And it's a challenge that you're facing because you are familiar with the policy language in your community, because that's what you hear in the news and that's what's described when you go to the coffee shop, on the soccer fields. But the technical language is what you're operating in from the technical staff that are providing you support. The codes are written by the technical staff to meet all the whistles and bells and all the things that we need to check. As a result of bad development decisions, as we see development that we don't like, there are new rules that are adopted, and the idea is to tighten all of this down. So we want to micromanage all those pieces. The challenge is to figure out where are the areas in your community that you can allow the next increment of development the next level of innovation and entrepreneurship that doesn't have to go through that meat grinder through 12 planning commission meetings and a series of public hearings and kissing rings and paying lots of money to only be told that it's mediocre at best and maybe it'll make it as it goes through the next process. So if we look at, if your dockets are full with lots of stuff, where are the things that as citizens in your community that there is an acceptable level, I would describe it acceptable level of chaos, where the next increment of development, one of the things we ask folks to take a look at if housing is an issue, and it's an issue in all of your communities, do you allow the lowest increment of housing by right in your community, which would be described as an accessory dwelling unit? Would you allow in your community for somebody to take a room in their house or a back garage area and put a bathroom and kitchen in it and rent it to somebody? That's the lowest increment of development that is permissible in many cities, but unfortunately most are now prohibited. And we just got news in the last 2 weeks that the subsidized mortgages, the Freddie, the USDA, all those mortgages now will cover the construction of accessory dwelling units. So the financial tools are there. But that type of incremented development is something that as citizens in your community, as folks bridging between your technical staff and the policymakers in your community, you should be looking for those. If you allow those accessory dwelling units by right in your community, what is the next increment of housing development to assist with affordability? Do you allow duplexes? Could somebody take a property that's vacant or a house that and split it so that you could yield 2 units out of it and create that fee simple? These are the things that you should be asking for and not dive into the technical piece and not get stuck in the high policy pieces, but thinking about that next increment of development that's allowed in your community that your neighbors would not be objectionable to. And if they are, we step down and we work on the educational component to it. But many communities that we talk to, that next increment is very achievable and acceptable. And if we could get that off your dockets so that people didn't have to come to a planning commission or have to go to a BZA for a variance and could do more of that by right, it opens you up to deal with the projects that are not sustainable for your communities, that truly the community is objectionable to because the developer is asking way too much or packing too much in a site, or hasn't thought about the long-term ramifications. Getting you focused on that tough stuff and allowing at the ground level this entrepreneurship to happen.
Right, excellent. Well, let's hear from our community planners. Debbie, how about you first? What do you see as the challenges going forward to try to achieve the objectives in the communities where you work, and especially in Frederick?
What I've seen in the communities that I've worked is 2 things that undermine the integrity of your vision. And those 2 things are the impression that there's a silver bullet, that one thing that if you just do that, I'll give you an example. You've got a traffic problem, all you got to do is widen the road. We all know that's not true. There's not a silver bullet to fix the traffic issue. It's never that. So that will undermine your vision. That will undermine where you want to be. So that's one thing. The silver bullet is something to be careful about. But the other one is the easy fix. And I see it all the time, and I've seen it in every jurisdiction. You've got a code, and you've got one property owner, one developer that really wants to do a certain thing, and maybe it's good for the community, and maybe it's politically something that your bosses want to see. However, that requires changing the code. It's a ZTA, zoning text amendment. And we do these little piecemeal things, and we fix this issue over here with the ZTA, and we fix this one over here with the ZTA, and next thing you know, you've got documents that are voluminous, they're complicated, they contradict themselves within the document, they contradict other documents. So you've created a monster by allowing these little piecemeal things. It's not piecemeal zoning, because we all know you can't do that, but it's the same kind of effect, and it undermines your entire vision. Those are the biggest challenges that I've seen, and that I see will continue, just because that is the way that the public comes at you, politicians, developers, and they come at you with these little things, because yes, you can do them, but you shouldn't.
Okay. We're going to ask the audience to think about the feedback and the comments that you might like to add to what you've already heard. Tay, what do you see in terms of going forward in Calvert County and the communities where you've worked that are challenges that need to be dealt with?
Well, I'm going to add to some of the previous conversation, and I'm going to speak specifically to like affordable housing. So I think some of the challenges for Calvert County and across the state is that we've been informed recently that, EV infrastructure is going to make its way into the building code, and within a few years, we will see it be a requirement for new housing construction. So if that happens, it's going to complicate affordable housing even further. And for communities like Calvert, who don't want high density and really high density in their town centers, ADUs, again, might not be consistent with their vision for how they want to see growth. So mandates coming down from the state are going to complicate things, as they always do. But also just even market forces. The big box development always wants to make its way into town centers. And again, that's not always the vision for all our town centers. And we do have form-based zoning down in Solomons, so that helps. And Solomons obviously has a character of its own, and a lot of people are familiar with Solomons Island. But for our other town centers, it's a challenge. So moving forward, it's attracting the right kind of development given your zoning regulations and the framework that you work from. And then also in some of our town centers, addressing water and sewer so that we can expand our retail and commercial services to serve the community.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Tay. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from the community planners out in our audience. What challenges do you see in your communities going forward to achieve the goals and the vision that you have? And we've got Joe coming with a microphone so everybody can hear you, because we've got a larger group. You'll be second, sir. We have a gentleman back here in the back. Identify yourself, if you will. Give us your name and your jurisdiction.
Hi, my name is Owen Bailey. It's very loud. I'm on the Planning Commission for the town of Chestertown, and I'm also the Director of Land Use and Policy for the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy. A frustration that I've seen in our town is we have this beautiful downtown, and it has a historic district commission. Our town is from 1706. We have buildings that are 300 years old, and that type of development is illegal to build everywhere else in our town. And we put so much value on it that we've created this historic district commission designed to protect it. I was on the historic district commission for years, and it always frustrated me that this type of old growth, incremental, walkable communities are illegal to build everywhere else, and that's our fault. We've put that on ourselves. And it's so hard to correct that. And from my perspective, from my job, I've seen this in every one of our communities that has a historic district commission. Mm-hmm. And when we see the new developments on the edges of our towns that are supposed to be more affordable, that affordability is completely undercut because anybody living there has to own a car. And I've seen statistics from across the country that show that car insurance is one of the leading contributing factors to generational poverty. So until we find a way to course correct this, it's kind of hard, and it puts planning commissions in a tough spot.
How many of you in the audience have a concern about the very topic that this gentleman has introduced? How many of you have a concern about that? We don't want to lose our walkable communities, but There's a lot of challenge that goes with that vision. There was a gentleman up here. You next, sir. Introduce yourself and your jurisdiction.
Good morning. My name is Chris Tillman, and I am a city councilman in Tonytown. I'm also the council liaison to the Planning Commission. I have a number of concerns, but when we're talking about affordable housing, one of our concerns is how do we revitalize our downtown where there is a lot of affordable housing today, but the affordability is due to, borderline substandard housing. How do we improve that? We're a very old city. There's not a lot of room for infill development. There are areas that could be redeveloped with better low, moderate income housing. But in order to do that and to do the gentrification that we would like to do in the downtown, we have to displace a great many low income people. And what do we do with them? So that's a huge challenge for us, and I'm all ears for ideas to that. And one thing I do want to mention, since you talked about accessory dwellings, in our town we have become sort of a mecca for the high-end country destination weddings. We have 3 high-end wedding venues in town, and when you start approving accessory dwellings, what you're going to get are Airbnbs. And I'm in the bed and breakfast business myself, and I've seen it happen. I know it happens. So I think that there is a flip side to that accessory dwelling thing that I think needs to be considered and handled. Thank you.
Okay. How many of you share some of those same concerns in terms of your community? All right?
I hear that in a lot of places, that if we do this, this bad thing will happen. I want to change the mindset and how we frame these and structure it. So a lot of times we are framing these as problems and solutions. We have an affordable housing issue, we're going to get a solution. And we hire a consultant to help us through that, or we look at technical staff, because their job as technical staff or as an engineer or a market analysis person is to give you a solution. What if you change this and you talk about this as a struggle and a response? Boiling it down, if affordable housing is a struggle, what is a response that you can do? Something that is nimble, that is simple, that if it fails, failure is an option. Let me put that on the table. So if you allow for ADUs and you get 6 of them built in your community, and then all of a sudden now you get hotel motel tax off of 6 of those, you can change course. But if one of those ADUs provides a housing option that's not an Airbnb, if of those 6, if one provides an option for somebody to live in your community, that's a pretty big success. And you can build on that and respond to that. So now the struggle is we have 6 of these in the community this year that were permitted and put in. 1 became affordable housing. Our next struggle is how do we get the next 6 built next year to have 3 of those that'll be a housing option? What is the response we can do to that? This gets us out of this cycle of silver bullets. And by doing these small chunks, we actually do something. We look at that and see what that response is. We sit back. I don't know if on the planning commissions, because it never happened in the planning commissions I was on, but 5 years after a project, a subdivision is built. Do you bring the plans back into the planning commission and look at it and see if it got built out the way you wanted it? Did it respond? No, we're too busy on the next project. But if we take the smaller bite-sized chunks and we look at these small things, what do we do? Let's analyze it. All of your city staff have incredible systems to map all of these, and building permit software and accounting software to see all these pieces. But if we get away from problems and looking for the silver bullet solutions and start thinking about these things as struggles and responses, and we have identified struggles and looking at small incremental responses we can try a lot of those responses till we can dial this in calibrated specifically for your community. But I would not abolish the idea of allowing ADUs in the fear that they're all going to be Airbnbs and rented out for folks coming in from outside to coming into the community until you try it and actually look at what that response is.
I'd like to add a little nuance here, if I may.
Sure, absolutely.
Having come from Garrett County, which is probably very similar, and it's a vacation spot and similar concern. ADUs are going to turn into Airbnb and Verbos and that sort of thing there. One of the things I've preached throughout Maryland, and Joe will probably laugh at me because he's heard me say it, is regional, one size does not fit all, right? So the idea of an ADU, what it looks like in your jurisdiction and what it looks like in an urban environment are going to be completely different. And to get to Tay's point about state mandates being a problem, when there's a mandate coming down from the state saying you shall do whatever, and we don't have the flexibility to fit the ADU concept into the vision of your community and what's in your community versus what's in somebody else's community. There are some communities that need growth, some communities that don't need growth. Everybody's different. So the concept, the planning theory, if you will, of an ADU or this great thing, it's not the silver bullet, but it's part of a package that needs to be massaged to fit into community. And even speaking, being in Frederick County, largest county in the state, you can't even look within our county without saying it's going to look different from this point to this point. We're looking at that right now for APFOs.
Mm-hmm.
One APFO for the county really doesn't work. You've got to start looking at, it's got to look different in different settings, and you need to have that flexibility. So I think that's the nuance that bridges the gap between ADUs don't work here and ADUs should work everywhere. They do probably work everywhere, much like smart growth works everywhere. It looks different in different jurisdictions.
Absolutely. Seth, you had a comment?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say the concerns regarding ADUs are legitimate concerns, and they need to be recognized and addressed. I was doing some work out in Seattle a couple of years ago, and traffic out there is a nightmare. I was trying to literally figure out where to stay where I wouldn't be spending 3 hours commuting in that traffic between where I was staying and where I wanted to work. And it turned out one of the best locations was in a pre-war community neighborhood, which now, by the way, has a light rail line running through it, where the ADUs have been there for 50 years. So it wasn't a new thing that was just suddenly introduced in the neighborhood. And I stayed in fantastic carriage houses. One of the questions, I wouldn't characterize affordable housing as a struggle. It's a challenge. Meaning it's not going to be an easy challenge. It's not going to be an easy thing, an immediate thing to address. But I do think this idea of having flexibility and a not one-size-fits-all approach is very, very useful. And by the way, there's a lot of information online about ADUs. But another way to reframe this is it's actually the smallest increment of income development that an individual homeowner can engage in. Everybody's worried about these kind of big, large-scale solutions to affordable housing. When I say affordable, I'm always meaning market rate affordable. And quite frankly, getting back to the issue of standards, you can build more affordable housing that will be built to a different level of standards than a lot of what's being built out right now. The community that comes to my mind immediately when we talk about this is Newmarket, Maryland, just east of Frederick, where they had this wonderful, delightful, sort of colonial era village, and then they built an extension, what we would call an urban extension to that village, and they immediately went to large lot, single-family detached housing, which doesn't look anything at all like Newmarket. And of course, a lot of people bought those houses because, look, it's next door to this charming community, and the charming community becomes sort of kind of the amenity for all that new suburban development. But what happens is there's no incremental transition from that historic, compact, walkable, mixed-use community to the now large lot, single-family detached development that dwarfs it. And this is, again, where having community scale plans and codes that allow for and to facilitate that kind of transition, so that you're actually serving the broad spectrum of the market and not catering exclusively just to one small demographic segment. And everybody knows that we're living in a much more diverse population now in terms of housing needs and preferences. And again, having those things, that kind of flexibility allows for that. One of the big issues I always run into, we're doing a 300-acre project right now in Charles County, which will have ADUs as an integral part of our product mix right from day one. So we don't have to, we don't have to ask anybody's permission to do it. We're building it as an integral part of design. But this idea, one of the issues I run into all the time is the disconnect between the comprehensive plan policy goals and objectives and the supportive regulatory framework to actually facilitate and enable those policy objectives to be achieved. And again, this is where I think a graphic or form-based codes can be really helpful in facilitating that, and also in facilitating conversations between the development community and the residents within the community and the elected officials and citizen planners that need to moderate that conversation. So simplicity, clarity, and one of the ways that we approach that in Charles County is we talked about our project was going to be principle-based, meaning that you get everybody to decide and agree on what the principles are, and then you use those principles to define how you want to translate those within your own community. And the other one we deal with a lot is what I refer to as performance-based zoning, where you're actually tying what is being proposed to be developed to specific objective performance-based metrics that you can then evaluate in a much more rational and objective way whether or not this project is meeting all of the key goals and objectives for the community as a whole.
All right, excellent. Tay, as regards Calvert County in that area, what do you see as the challenges going forward?
I'm sorry, in what area? I've kind of gotten lost in all the answers. What's the question again?
Well, I said, in terms of your jurisdiction, Calvert County,
yes,
what do you see as the challenges going forward in terms of your planning commission and your priorities?
I think, I just think educating them with the framework and then in our new political climate, because the new administration is a lot more no growth, in my opinion, than the previous one. So I just think educating and working with them, and like you said, getting caught up in the zoning ordinances and the frameworks and then throwing in the politics. It's just a very careful balance. And I think that's always been the case, and it's always going to be the case moving forward, but it is going to be, for Calvert County, a challenge.
Okay. Anyone in the audience? Anyone have a comment or a question? Yes. Please identify yourself and what jurisdiction first.
Yeah. My name's Ben Tillman. I'm on the Planning Commission in Queen Anne County. And we have a rather unique position that we share with Anne Arundel, and that is we're the landing point of the Bay Bridge. This causes a huge number of people to be going through our county who probably don't want to be here on their way to Ocean City. So the question really is one that involves the relationship of economic development and the planning commissions. How do we capitalize on that? Is it beautification? Is it more fast food stores? Is it more fine dining? What's our role in the planning commission? Because I know this is a citizen concern, usually involving the practical matters of traffic. In other words, how do we get a quart of milk when we can't get across Route 50? But thinking of it in a more positive term, how would the panel go about helping us with that issue?
Okay. Any feedback from the panel in that regard?
Sure. I will just throw at you something that we did in Charles County. There was a gentleman in economic development who I used to tease that we just needed to get an office for him so he could just camp out in in the planning office. We went often hand in hand to the Planning Commission to give both the planning perspective from a technical aspect, but also the economic development perspective. And having been in multiple jurisdictions, it has always amazed me that sometimes there's this rub between economic development and planning. And when that happens, then everybody loses. So one of the first things I do when I go into a jurisdiction is I meet the head of economic development and say, hey, we're about to become best friends. You have to actively do it. Now, I'm talking on a staff level, but if you are in a jurisdiction, any of you, where that rub exists, I would use your role as Planning Commission to encourage not just your staff to fix that gap, but also talk to your politicians and say, hey, we need more in-line cooperation between planning and economic development so that we can have a complete picture of the vision and how we implement it.
All right, excellent. Anyone else have a comment? I see a hand going up here. Just a minute.
Hi, Kevin Waterman. I'm on the Town of Denton Planning Commission. I think what's probably the single biggest thing, not necessarily just for Denton, but probably through the whole state, is on the topic of ADUs, duplexes, tris, quads, cottage clusters. We've all seen what's happening in California, Washington, Oregon, what was introduced in Colorado, although it didn't succeed. Ultimately, I think even if the localities don't want it, if they don't start moving forward with legalizing more forms of housing in a robust, meaningful fashion, the reality is the state is going to come in and force it down on the localities, at which point the choice won't be there to develop it in the way that with more nuance and control for your local area. So that I think it's serious time to start having serious discussions between planning boards and local government, elected officials, that how do we do this, even if it isn't popular, because that's going to be better probably than the alternative, particularly if we care about preserving local control.
All right. And I think there was another gentleman up here closer. There's a hand up.
Thank you. My name is Joel Rensberger. I'm from the Frederick County Planning Commission. One of the challenges we face is that in 2012, 2013, about 12 or 14,000 houses were approved for development. Those projects are coming online the last 5 years and will continue to come online for the next couple of years. Our schools in that part of the county are 35 and 40 students in the classroom. The public that we get in our meetings are objecting to school overcrowding, and it seems like there's no planners in the public school system, because it wasn't a secret that these projects were going to come online. They did, but we don't have enough chairs for the butts in the schools. We don't have enough land, we don't have enough buildings. And what we're told as we're fielding in these evening meetings, we're fielding these angry moms, right, about this school crowding. What we get told off camera is that the state of Maryland funds schools based on need, and you've got to be 120% of capacity or 125% of capacity before you can get your state dollars. So it seems like a baked-in mismatch where you've got local planning. We knew what was happening. We all knew it. It's public. But then at the state level, they say, well, wait until you have a crisis and then we'll address it. And that strikes some of us as the opposite of planning. That's one of our challenges. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments to what's already been said so far? I see a couple more hands. All right, one at a time.
My name is Paula Reeder. I sit on the Planning Commission for Kent County. I also have the benefit of sitting on the local county Economic and Tourism Development Commission, so I get to see both sides. Our county is a little different than most of yours because it's one of the few counties in the state of Maryland to have lost population in the last several years. The other complicating factor and challenge is how we balance competing interests. In our county, over 85% of the ground is zoned agricultural and pays agricultural taxes. That leaves, when you get rid of the undevelopable land, about 11% of total acreage that's available, at least ostensibly, for development. That's a real challenge in and of itself. We have been struggling to attract development. Some of the issues there are local policies. Some of the issues relate to state mandates that encourage increased dedication of acreage to agricultural pursuits when we don't have enough other land to attract developers. So balancing competing interests, we do have a very vocal group that is committed to opposing change. And they are the ones who show up in the meetings. They are the ones who attract the most attention from the media. And it's very difficult to get local people to come and testify for their own benefits because, one, they're afraid of being attacked by the group, and two, they feel the system's rigged. So those are our biggest challenges. The other thing is we only have 5 incorporated towns in the entire county, and they're spread out, widely spread out, so there's not a lot of necessarily interaction between the communities. They tend to operate independent of one another. So those are the challenges we face. I think they're a little different than a lot of the people who are faced with burgeoning development that's outpaced their ability to handle it. We would like to see some of us.
Excellent. I think there was another hand or two. There's one up here.
Good morning, Jenny Plummer-Welker, retired planner from Calvert County, started with Maryland Office of Planning as an intern. I think some of the biggest challenges for all our communities, whether it be in rural areas or the urban areas, whether we're in Maryland or another state, is reaching out to the young people to get their voice heard in the planning process. Planning meetings are often at night, which means people who work during the day often are challenged because they have children and other responsibilities. I think COVID, as horrible as it was, opened up the opportunity for people because we went to virtual meetings and people could attend from their homes. We held a virtual meeting for outreach for our liaisons for the Dunkirk Town Center Master Plan update, and one of the women said, if this was not virtual, I could not attend. I have 3 children and cannot attend planning meetings. So I think reaching out so that we have more diverse voices in the planning process. I've been involved with working with young children, going to middle schools and elementary schools and taking blocks of wood, 2x4s that I cut up myself and sand it, and butcher paper and markers and ask them to design their towns. I worked with a small town in just north of Clemson. These kids, these 5th graders should have been on the planning commission because they placed their airport next to their train station and they put their sidewalks up to their school. So I think involving the young people would be a definite positive for all our communities. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else want to share a comment?
Alan Feinberg, professional planner, but really a citizen planner. And one of the things, it's interesting that the last speaker from Calvert County, there was a young woman who was affected by Frank Jackwitz, and she went out to Denver and she started one of the most robust citizen planning academies anywhere. And I think that that's what we need, is citizen planning academies, so people don't have to do the dumb conversation of growth or no growth. It's how you manage your growth is so important. So building that network of people that can be leaders who can see the nuance of all of this like you do is critically important. So I think there is an effort right now with Maryland APA to do more on citizen planning academies. I think the more we can do, the faster we can do it, is really a huge part of that answer that you're talking about.
All right, cool. Any comments or feedback from members of our panel to the comments we just heard?
I want to address the gentleman in the back that said something about state mandates. I just want to make a suggestion for everybody. So as a staff person, we're highly involved with MACO Planners Affiliate, who really are our lobbyists in the General Assembly. And as these laws are being drafted, we're getting told about the state mandates that are about to come down. And we are being active, especially with housing policy right now. We know that there's state entities that are drafting some regulations that will really take local control away. So what MACO is doing is working with the planners to try to get an answer to that, so we can be proactive and say, hey, we hear what you're saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we suggest, so that we can come up with some sort of a compromise here. So that's probably what all your planners are doing, but you may or may not know about it. What I would suggest is that you ask your planners to give a report to you when you meet, so that you know what we're doing as staff to be ahead of the state mandates that are coming down towards us.
Okay, excellent. Any comments or reactions to what we just heard?
Let me share another concept.
Okay.
All of your jurisdictions are really good at performance standards. So when these mandates come down from strong towns, we would not support a state or federal mandate on a community. So the tool you have are your performance standards. So you can performance standard these things out, regulate it. You all have those, you're on boards about regulation. You can regulate those things out. But what we need to think about as communities, as strong towns, we describe, if we think about government, there's the federal government and they have a military and they can print money. There's state government, they even have their own little military and they can do things. At the very bottom, the lowest level of government is even below the county, it's city government. You're in any group you go to, except for probably in this room, you're considered the algae of government. You're the lowest life form. Nobody listens to you, right? But from a strong town's perspective, you actually have the highest level of collaboration at that. You're responsible at a city level to deal with the needs of your community members. They're your neighbors that you are working with through these decisions and thought processes. You actually have a much higher purpose than any of these other groups because you don't have all the resources available at the higher levels. You have to solve problems day by day and respond to those problems as they go forward. As I heard in the audience, there are places that are cherished in all of your communities that were traditionally built generations ago. They started out with wooden shacks and stone buildings. And incrementally, those places adapted from wood and 1 story to stone and 2 stories, and over time were developed upward. And once those wood shacks filled out and turned to stone and brick on the main street, wood shacks were then built 1 block out from that. That is the traditional pattern that we have done for thousands of years as human beings. In the last 60 years, we decided we were smarter than that and put in rules and regulations that were very orderly to try to control that chaos so that we would orderly place this stuff out. Nobody's battling in your planning commissions about that traditional pattern in your communities. Most people point to that and say, why can't we get that? What we're pointing to are the things that are following these regulations and vision and development patterns, these suburban patterns that we have been adopted and accept as the business model in our communities. When we talk about agriculture land, I don't know if you've seen the work of Urban 3. They do a value per acre analysis. What's interesting is all their data that they see. We work with them all the time, so we get to see a lot of the data that is not in all the presentations. But one of the data we all see is these compact, walkable areas the areas that you cherish in your community, value per acre are off the charts. They're generating revenue and are self-sustaining and return on investment year over year over year in your communities. That's why your communities aren't bankrupt, is because of these areas. When you do the same analysis over agricultural land, how many police calls does a cow need? How much sewer does a soybean field need? The expenses, even though those taxes are low, they don't require the service providing that you need as you would have in a suburban area. They actually are money makers in a value per acre when you overlay what your municipal expenses are. So when you look at these places, if look at those traditional patterns and ask yourself, why can we not do that today? Thousands of years of time, hundreds of years within all of your, at least 100 years in many of your cities that we were able to do that. Why can't we not do that today in those areas? And then when we look at, when we're under development pressure, thinking about not trying to repeat what other places are doing. I mean, I would talk to other planning commissioners that are here, people sitting on these boards, and you don't want their problems. You don't want your neighbors to be angry about projects they're dealing with. You have an opportunity in your communities to reinforce that next smallest step, the small incremental development infill, the expansion of what you currently have, the thickening up of your communities. It doesn't matter what the intensity is. If you want to be a low density rural community, then embrace that. What are the next smallest steps there? But if you want to be the Frederick or Hagerstown or Annapolis, what is that next density of development in there? That's at the lowest level of government. That's where the highest level of coordination is. That's the responsiveness that you're able to do at the level that you're at, and embrace that.
Okay, excellent. Did I hear, yep, Sharon?
Hi, Sharon Kemper-Surez. I'm a AICP. I've done private and public sector planning. I've been active in the Maryland Planning Association. I'm currently a planner at City of Frederick. I do not represent the City of Frederick here today. I'm attending. But I do have to mention something that we've talked about before. One of the challenges I think in the future, if you talk about the lowest level of increment of things, when we apply that to citizen planning, the Planning Commission itself is not the lowest level of involvement. All over the state of Maryland and elsewhere, we have local neighborhoods that have been organized, homeowners associations, civic associations related to neighborhoods, developments, etc. In Howard County, there are 300 and some civic associations, many of whom have somebody dedicated to monitoring local planning activities. In Montgomery County, there are close to 1,600 civic associations each trying to, most of those actually do have a person assigned to monitor planning and the impacts of surrounding developments. They've organized in a more macro situation, so they have one or two macro organizations of civics that coordinate very closely with with Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Prince George's County the same way. If we as a lot of our communities, and the City of Frederick has done a good job of dividing the city up graphically and having neighborhood association advisory councils, we call them, and we make sure that they're informed. But the advisory councils then their responsibility ought to be to keep all the subdivisions and civic associations in their areas informed, and that's where there's a sort of a failure. What happens? One of the first indications that we need something, we need to instruct them on the procedures that they need to expect from us as staff and as planning commissioners, is that they show up en masse outraged over the fact that something is allowed by right, but is being reviewed and they don't like it. Mm-hmm. The expectations that planning commissioners have legislative power, increasing, I attend hearings, I see it even in the City of Frederick. When we have a by right issue, we're just making sure that everything was, all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. So the expectation that the Planning Commission is somehow going to change the law, those discussions are best had with the governing board, the mayor and board of aldermen. But not knowing how that works, you would think we would all know, right? But civics was in middle school for many people, and frankly, how that translates into our experience with local government is we just don't know. But we have a challenge to make sure that people understand what the procedures are, what we expect from them, and then to guard the soapbox. The microphone in today's world is the soapbox. Most of the time, the loud voices take over. Our goal as planners and planning commissioners is to ensure that all voices are heard, and that is making sure that no one intimidates the audience. So how we do that is one of the things we need to address. So in going forward, those are the issues I really urge us to tackle. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, in the last 10, 15 minutes, I'd like for you to speak to members of the MPCA and the Maryland Department of Planning. Yes? We have a person back in the back?
Quick comment, yep.
Okay, quick comment.
All right, no, it will be hopefully a very quick comment. So I'm from James Hedrick from Montgomery County and the Planning Board. We have sort of, I think, some different challenges than we've been discussing. I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit more about our biggest challenge is having enough housing for the people that want to live there. And so we need more than ADUs to address our housing issue. We're 60,000 short. According to our COG, I think we're closer to 100,000 short if we want to stop the massive increases in rent. So I wonder if you guys could start talking a little bit maybe about sort of increasing supply and increasing the supply of housing that we have in our jurisdictions.
Okay. All right, now in the time that remains before this session is up, I want you to speak to the members of the Maryland Department of Planning and the members of MPCA. How many of us are here representing either Department of Planning or MPCA? I know we've got some, okay. What I want you to do is to say what assistance, what support should these organizations provide that would help you be more effective to meet the types of challenges that we have just identified. Okay? What could MPCA do in terms of conferences like this, in terms of training, in terms of resources that they could make available? Any ideas, any thoughts in that regard? Now's your chance. We're asking for your feedback. Yes, sir? All right. Do we have a microphone, or we'll just simply repeat what you had to say?
Well, my name is Ben Harrison. I'm president of Sandtown Winchester Improvement Association.
All right, and improve, okay.
For years, we had master plans to chase the community. Every time there's a master plan.
Okay, in terms of master plans, all right, turn around. Okay, that's better.
We have these master plans.
Yeah.
That were good plans. A lot of community effort was put into these plans.
Yep.
But they never are followed through.
Okay, we got a microphone coming for you. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate that.
They're never followed through.
In terms of the master plans?
Yes, and the community is bewildered. Okay. I'm bewildered as a community leader.
And every 10 years, we're required by state law to update our master plan.
Right, but to me, it's almost like it's a hustle for people from other places to come in. They do this plan, and I said, these people must be getting paid by somebody. They're gone, and we're left with nothing but the same situation that we're under. And I like to get some help with the
Isn't your master plan developed by your local planning commission?
No, it's master plan, well, the state and then the community as well. Under Kirk Smoke at one time, even though he was the mayor of Baltimore City. And we had this plan, have a swimming pool for youth, because a lot of the youth, needed some type of, like a recreation, and plus a lot more education after school projects, affordable housing for seniors and so forth. So it was a great plan. But the plan, as politicians come through, they don't have the same type of vision that like the mayor did at the time. Okay. So each time we getting disenfranchised because, the plans not follow through. Now we have this plan where they merged us with another community, Harlem Park, and our population is greater and so forth. They said we're supposed to be getting more money, but myself and the vast majority of the people community don't know what's the updates or anything concrete about going forward with the plan. We're left out of the process.
Then I would say go to your planning commission, whoever's in charge of the local planning authority, and ask them, where do we stand with regard to our master plan requirements and so forth? Where are we and what else is needed?
Right. Well, I asked the city planner, the person that was out planning. He said he didn't know.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
all right.
Help me.
All right. So I'm going to repeat my question. In terms of requesting of the MPCA, how they could help you in terms of the challenges that you and your fellow planning commissioners have going forward in your local jurisdiction. What assistance, what support are you asking for? What do you think they could do in that regard? That can either be the audience or it could be a panel member that speaks to that. Okay, we've got one back here. All right, need to hand off the microphone. Thank you, sir. This is a golden opportunity for you to speak to MPCA and say, here's what we need, here's what we want to ask you to help us with.
Paula Reeder again. I'm surprised that no one in this room has mentioned the big pink elephant in the room that is the Kerwin mandate and its impact on us as individual counties. I failed to mention that in Kent County, we are now facing a budget crisis because our tax revenue is insufficient to pay the anticipated cost of continuing.
Many jurisdictions share that same problem and concern.
Our county commissioners have come to the state and asked for some consideration to alleviate the burden of total funding of the Kerwin mandates over the scheduled term, and so far we haven't gotten an affirmative response. But as far as the state council goes, I think if you could take the position that one size fits all is not a good approach to state mandated programs, including Kerwin, including the MALF funding that goes into preserving land in perpetuity, including the, there's another one now I'm blanking, including the no loss of trees. Believe me, I understand the no loss of trees, but in some places it just, as our fellow from Queen Anne's County says, doesn't make sense. So also approaching things with better coordination with local planning commissions. Find out, learn about our individual concerns, challenges, and needs before the state, you go to the state with a one-size-fits-all proposal.
Okay.
Those are my suggestions.
Thanks so much. All right, I want to thank, one last comment over here. On that side?
There's one here.
Oh, there's one over here, all right.
There's three.
Let's make it quick.
Owen Bailey. Owen Bailey, transit is a big issue. We've seen it across the Eastern Shore. We can't build affordable housing without transit, as I mentioned before, and it is working. transit. Our local governments are helpless to fix the issue of lack of transit or transportation. We don't really have any here on the Eastern Shore, and I've seen housing projects come up where they are completely undercut because of lack of transit and the need for parking consuming too much of the square foot of the project.
All right, thank you, sir. And I think there was one other?
There's two others.
Two others. Okay, good. Your eyes are better than mine.
I'm Tom Delaberto from Betterton, Maryland, in Kent County. We're shrinking a little too from the last census, but the lady from Kent County made a very good point about us all being bound, and there's no size reflection in a lot of the regulations. Right now we're 278 people in our town, and we're struggling to put together a comprehensive plan.
278.
You know what it requires from all of you. Well, the same thing is required from us. And I think that has to be addressed. We're not unique. There are a lot of small towns. And just as a side note, the last thing we had to deal with at our council, or not our council, our board of planning and zoning, was chicken coops. Okay? The design of chicken coops, the enforcement of chicken coops.
Yeah.
These issues are not covered in a lot of places, and there's a difference between a lot of you and us. And we'd like some recognition of that difference.
All right, excellent.
There's that gentleman in the back.
Okay, one last comment. I think we've got somebody. Let's make it brief. Need to give you guys a break before the next session.
Kevin Waterman again. I recognize I may be the only person in the room who feels this way, but given its frankly toxic history, I'd be interested in hearing some discussion or at some point about, was Euclid wrongly decided, and what does planning look like in the absence of zoning? Because we do have places in the country that don't rely on it.
Okay, excellent. All right. Thank you so much for your feedback. And if you have another comment, another suggestion that you'd like to make to a member of MPCA or the Maryland Department of Planning, please do so before you leave the conference. I want to thank our panelists. I think their contribution has been outstanding, and thanks to all of you.